All right, we're recording.
Okay, I'd like to call the September 12th meeting of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee to order. Let's start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. John Anderson here, Sally DeWitt,
Here.
Lorraine Hughes,
Here.
and Jason Lindsay has another commitment tonight, so he will not be attending. There are 4 members of the CBOC and 3 are required for a quorum, and we have that quorum. Do I have any comments on the agenda? If not, we'll approve main agenda by unanimous consent. Public comment for items not on the agenda. I don't see any. With that, let's move forward. First item of business is the consent items. Since none were pulled from the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to pull one.
You do,
I was waiting for this section. I didn't realize.
okay.
The draft of the minutes for August 15th meeting.
Okay, we'll pull those. So there are only 2 items on the consent agenda with that. And they're approved by unanimous consent. While we're here, what are the issues with the 15th?
Oh, well, if you go to page 6. It's the minutes for that. Page 6. Well, it was page 6 on 14. Page 14. Okay. This is page what? All right, it was in the part where they were saying about the bond accountability. And it said that we were talking about the FAI, I believe. And there was, let's see. And it said that
Which item was it? F?
I think it was G. But anyway, it said that the report had the limits, statistic limits not were sufficient in it. And one of the limits was that it had to be, this was for the performance, I'm sorry, performance appraisal. And it was for, it didn't meet the March 31st deadline, but it sounded like it had in that statement. So I'd just like to double check on that. I believe it was a statement Melissa might have been.
So it's on page 16 at the top of the page.
Yeah, it was at the top. Yeah, right there, I think. It was.
So the report was not provided
yeah.
in advance of March 31st, but it was provided on March 31st, which is the statutory deadline. But it wasn't provided in advance of that.
Well, it was provided in April.
The presentation of the report?
Yeah, but we never received a draft. Did we receive a draft in by March 31st?
So we can go back and confirm.
Yeah, that's
When it
just
was
the,
emailed and when it was presented and provide clarity in the minutes.
okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it's hard because the person doing it is doing it from the tape or whatever. They weren't at the meeting and it's hard for them to do that.
Okay, let's get into the staff presentations.
All right, good evening, everyone. Happy to be here again. Let me just get a slide in here a little better. There we go. So for our project status update, we have Kennedy and Richmond site-specific master planning, which leads into the prioritization for Measure R work. We are still pending board discussion, so we are scheduling a special board meeting to be able to get direction and clarity from the board on next steps and moving forward. For design, we have Hercules and Shannon both in the design. Hercules has actually been submitted to DSA now. So we have our back check comments in, so we're anticipating, or we're about to be done so that we get our back check comments. So, but it's moving along faster than we were anticipating, so that's good news.
Mhm.
Shannon, we just received 50% CD drawings on Friday, so we are in the midst of reviewing that. Moving towards our DSA submission in October. For procurement, the Riverside site improvements are scheduled for next summer. For Collins and Cameron, we're actually going to combine those two together in hopes of being more attractive to bidders. They have very similar scopes. They are replacing HVAC systems at both locations. So we are advertising that as we speak, the Collins and Cameron combined project. For design build, we have our Lake Campus replacement project, which we have pictures of. We do have two different increments there. So one increment is through DSA, and that's what we are under construction with. The second increment is in DSA right now, and the architect is putting together the changes requested by DSA through the VACCHECK system, and we'll be submitting those in the middle of September. And so hopefully that also will get out sooner than anticipated. For our construction, we have our Pinole Valley High School, where we have additional information further in the presentation. But we are wrapping towards the end of construction. We actually did a soft opening of the field and hosted the first football game on the stadium fields. That was exciting. We have our E-rate projects, which are still going on. There is an extension that's going to the board because we are having difficulty getting the equipment of the WAPs. We have put in a lot of the infrastructure components of the new wiring, but the actual WAP itself, that device that you see right there with blue light,
Oh, yeah.
those have not come in the way that we've anticipated for.
Mhm.
So that project is pulling out further. And then our Kennedy's Field projects, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get that updated on the last line there, but we are officially under construction. And we are working on that, and we have additional photos and things further in the presentation. Any questions here?
Nope.
Okay. So speaking of Kennedy, there we go. So they've removed the original home bleachers. So those are gone along with the asphalt underneath of it. So there's nothing left there but dirt, which is exciting. We are also trying to connect into the main electrical and low voltage of the campus. So this is over by the multi-purpose room building. And you can see here, they've outlined what's already existing in the ground. So there was a lot of hand digging around this area. Thank goodness we really didn't break much. So they're going to be doing the trenching we're trying to complete all of the, groundwork before the rain starts, so, that's the main focus of this project at this time. For Lake Elementary School, we are doing similar soil prepping, so there's a lot of soil pictures this month. It's the month of soil. So, here we're doing grading activities to be able to get the, area that's in the first phase down to grade. If you go down Giant Road, you are going to see a big pile of dirt, which I have later in presentation. That's where all the dirt is going to. So when you go down Giant, you are able to see this. This dirt, for the most part, will be utilized when we get to phase 2, because we're going to raise where the current blacktop is up further, as well as the turf fields. So we're kind of shifting the soil around the site. The other thing that happened is we did the line treating preparation for the building pads themselves. So we do have prepped building pads for building A, B, and C, which is the office, library, and classroom buildings for grades 1 through 6.
Ellen, could you just tell them the difference between increment 1 and increment 2, basically increment 1 being underground work?
Right. So it's hard because we have 2 increments and 2 phases. So they, but they're not the same. So the increments are, increment 1 is our underground work and our preparation of our soil and building pads, but it doesn't get into necessarily the foundations themselves or anything else beyond that. So it's really just getting the underground utilities in. And we take that increment to DSA first because it allows us to get moving faster. And the beauty of a design build, it allows us to do some building projects before we're totally ready for the full building project. So it kind of helped speed this timeline along. So those are the 2 increments. But when we talk about phases, we have phase 1, which is the buildings A, B, and C. And then we have phase 2, which is the other half of the site that gives us the multi-purpose room and kindergarten area and playground space. So we'll be flopping between these increments and these phases. And so, and it's hard because actually increment 1 has work in phase 2 as well as in phase 1, because we'll be prepping and putting underground utilities, obviously, in both of those phases. So it's a little disjointed as far as how we talk about it, but that's the game plan. Then we have Pinole Valley High School. Like I said, we did get, oh, okay, never mind. That button doesn't want to work. We do have the football field fully installed with the track. And we did host the first football game. There is still, the building is still under construction, and some of the site flat work around the building is still not completed. So we really just have this space right around the bleachers and the track itself completed. There also is visitor bleachers that are going in that are smaller, the smaller scale system than what's on the home side. Those are also not in yet, so we are not at full operating capacity, but we have done one. As you can see on this photo, this is halfway done with the turf in the baseball softball field complex. If we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see it from that angle, which is really fun because then we're able to see that we've got our backstop fencing is no longer just poles. It actually has fabric on it now, which is good. Over here, you can see the shot put area. We have our 2 scoreboards in. On this side, we've got a foul pole somewhere over there. All of these bags that you see are the infill for the turf system. So after the carpet goes down, we infill it with a variety. We have 3 different substances that make up the infill, help keep the fire bears standing up and provide some of our protection on the surface. So that's what this big collection of stuff over here is. We also are starting work up again at the upper plateau. So there is the edge banding that's going in around this that will allow us to pave off the basketball and tennis courts.
So, so you have the arrangement when it's done between the baseball and softball field is you won't be able to be playing two games or. You know,
No,
softball
they're
plays,
back to
baseball
back.
is.
They're back to back. It's a,
So it's a little different than like the answer is.
We all have so much.
Yeah,
property
you only
control.
have so much property. I can remember it.
Yeah.
Been to a baseball game there.
yeah, it's similar to what's at El Cerrito, where the two fields oppose one another.
We used to have a baseball field there. You didn't in the past. That was played down in one of the parks.
All right, and then we did not make this particular agenda with the monthly reports, but we do have them. So I'm going to bring those up quickly. And we will include them in the meeting
Minutes.
minutes. So for Kennedy, because this is our first communication really going out to the site, we kind of included a scope overview drawing as well as just a current construction shot for a lake that's very similar to what you saw in the PowerPoint, as far as we have our grading work happening. We're gonna go next to installing the site utilities. So it will be more backhoes to gain trenches this time instead of doing general grading. And then Pinole again, just highlighting the aerials from our very generous Earl. As far as status reports, we do have Lakes status report. And this status report is somewhat complicated because we did have allowances as part of the contract, as well as two different types of contingency. So all of those were part of the contract originally and are listed out here as we access them. And at Pinole, it looks a little different because this was a design build project. But included every month is the executed change orders. Now, this is of the beginning of September, so the last group of change orders that went on the 7th are not included in this list yet. But it shows that we have 20 executed change orders, most of which you can see are in the unforeseen and design change categories. The owner requested category is a very small number. So we've requested very little out of this project in addition to of added value. But we have run into quite a few unforeseen conditions as well as design challenges, which have led us to where we are with the change orders. We do still have a number of PCOs outstanding. This pending number. Oh, no. I am so sorry. These are backwards. This is the pending number. And this is the rejected number. So these are backwards.
Mhm.
Good news is that this is a pending number, and it also includes the 320 some thousand that was approved at the last change order. So it is smaller than where we've been before. But I will correct that before it gets into the minutes, that these two should be flipped. Yes,
John was right.
The unforeseen conditions, can you refresh your memory on that? What
so
were those?
a grand majority of the unforeseens have to deal with the water situation under the various areas. So when we've dug, we've run into a lot of underground water and wet soil conditions that has caused us to have to take out more soil or do additional prepping to be able to put additional rock back in. The other big component of the unforeseens is that there was a section of rock that was identified to be under the asphalt in both the tennis court. Well, basically the entire site, so including the tennis court basketball area, softball, baseball field, around building F, and portables are, that rock section did not end up being there. And so instead it was a collection of 3" minus of AB of soil, which was not a usable mix that was able to be off-hauled to a recycle center as anticipated by the bidder. It had to be off-hauled to a much further location that was an actual landfill that had higher disposal fees. So those are the two big things that occurred that kept, oh, and then the rain. Sorry, I forgot about the rain. So the atmospheric river also did not help us. So we ended up installing temp access roads that we weren't anticipating. But part of that was a delay caused by the unforeseen water that we accounted as we did.
I think the other piece of that was the detention basin where the.
That's
detention
the
basin-
design changes.
Oh, that's the design change, okay.
Ellen,
Yes,
when you said executed change orders, that's in the top part.
yes,
Now, they've been voted by the board and everything, and they're definite. Down below is still all pending, right?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
And just because it's a pending PCO doesn't mean it'll ever go forward as a full PCO or change order. So PCOs or potential change orders, and they can be, either a single item come as a change order, or they'll be combined, become a change order. It could be 1, 2, or 3, depending if they're like type.
Mhm.
But just because the contractor submits a potential change order doesn't necessarily mean we pay full value and or that we pay it at all. So,
Mhm.
but it's a mechanism for to bring to our attention that they see a design change or a change in if they bid, and then we either dispute it, and come to an agreement on what that might be. It either comes forward as a change order or goes in the rejected pile.
Mhm. Right.
and some things we ask about because we're trying to find solutions. So we can ask, several of these are actually different options. So we said, what if we solve it this way or that way? Can you price them both out so we can figure out which one's cheaper?
Mhm.
And so some of the ones that are voided are just that. It was, we were trying to explore what was the best way to solve the problem we ran into. And
Mhm.
so then you void out the one you didn't pursue and then you go forward with the one you did. So that's part of what's also in that voided category.
Mhm.
Yes. Should we acknowledge Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, well, I can't see him.
He has his hand raised.
Don,
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the owner requested change orders and the design changes. If, and I need help being unconfused here, and I'm sure it's just a matter of me being confused. But if the owner, that's us, did not request these, then who did request them? As then, if there were design changes, who decided that we needed to redesign something? Was that, I mean, it seems like that would be owner that would request that as opposed to the contractor asking for it. Can you help me on that?
I guess the way you read design changes, and it's about how it's defined, right? So we look at it as either an unforeseen condition that you wouldn't have known about it, right? And so the example is when we have drawings or documents that say it should consist of this type of makeup called the subbase. And then we find out that it doesn't exist in that documentation was inaccurate. So that would be an unforeseen condition, right? We didn't know, shouldn't have known about it. But when we look at design changes, we think of design changes in a lot of ways of things that actually should have known about. Or, and when those things come up, it's like, why didn't we know, why is it those items weren't identified by our architect or in another agency at the time. And so we look at those as, it's not a requested owner, it's a change that has to happen, but it's something that may have been prevented had we somehow had done the research or overturned it, or something that was overseen by the architect or an engineer during the design process. So
So
Is-
one of the examples of that would be, we've run into a few conflicts with the structural system. So we've had structural elements in the way of other elements that were shown on the drawings. So we had to make adjustments to the design to accommodate both the structural element as well as were either the doorway or the window or some other piece of the building that was in the design. So it was a conflict or a lack of coordination between the trades or the disciplines.
yeah, even though, architects, they use BIM and so other modeling ways, we still get complex time to time between different disciplines and changes that happen in drawings from electrical to plumbing to mechanical that don't get picked up within the architectural drawings or across the different disciplines. And so you'll have a pipe that could be going, a sewer pipe, and then you may have a storm drain that's going in the same direction and have to be at the same elevation, but they weren't caught, or electrical pipe that's going through there. And so one of them has to adjust or move. And so that would be a design change that should have been picked up, but it wasn't. But the contractor put it in the way that we'd asked them to, and there was a conflict, and so we have to pay him to make the change, to make it work.
I appreciate that. I mean, as somebody who's built oil refineries for 50 years, I love design changes. I've made a ton of money out of fixing things because somebody wasn't paying attention at the engineering office. And I thank you on that. One other item, please. Louis, it's difficult to hear you. You're very soft spoken. Maybe you could speak a little closer to your microphone, please.
I'll try
Thank
to
you.
speak. Hope that helps.
That just helps. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So then, we also have Kennedy's status report. Which doesn't have a lot to report because we've just started. So we have not paid a payoff yet. We have not, done anything. So while we have the base cost of the contract in place, there's not much else on here except for, the scope itself and what we're doing, which includes the mobilization, site demolition, and off-haul, and then upcoming work is really the electrical trenching, earthwork and grading. So
This is for the fields.
this is for the fields, and the one project issue that has come up that's not a huge surprise because it's hitting us everywhere is that we have a few long lead item pieces that look like it will push out the completion of the project date. As stated in the contract, we're working with the contractor to figure out the best way to minimize the impact to the site with that adjustment.
Yeah, just to Ellen's point, it's really the lifetime of shipment of certain materials, metals, aluminum, those type of things, or as we pointed out, electronics earlier on, coming from China. They're just huge delay times, and so it's really real. I think it's affected in our schedules.
So one of the things that the contractor has done is try to get his submittals in as quickly as possible so that we can go through these things, get in line. So we have a queue that we can sit in. And then also, once we're in the queue, we can get more realistic timelines of what that really means. And then we can plan accordingly, where if we haven't ordered it yet, it's very hard to get realistic timelines. And even after we order it, sometimes it's still really hard to get realistic timelines, but hopefully we're going through the schedule right now to try to figure out what the best approach is with some of these items. So those are the various reports. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Don.
Thank you. Sorry, just popped up when you talked about the aluminum and the stands. Was there a reason why we could not reuse the existing bleachers? Were they damaged, or was the design different for what the intended use was?
The hard part with the original design is they were engineered under a totally different code from
Okay.
quite. And so being able to structurally reinforce them would have been more expensive than they would have been worth saving.
That and accessibility, by the time you had the
Yes.
accessibility components for wheelchair access, they would have been, really had to be reworked in order for that to happen.
Also, it didn't meet the exiting requirements, so they didn't have the proper aisleways, and that kind of spacing that they require now. So they've gone a long way on bleacher systems of what they expect, as far as what a bleacher should have. Okay, any other questions? So with that, we'll return to the main agenda. Which we
It's
have
the
too many
annual
things up
report.
Well, we still had,
Oh, do,
the one comment, still no financial reports available.
No, earlier today, Lewis and I met with Robert McIntyre, the chief business official for the district. We expect to have the cumulative financial reports through June 30, 2022 for the October meeting. We received those reports in advance of that meeting. As soon as we have them, we will provide those over to the CBOC. And so I know there's a couple of other updates in regards to recruitment and the job description. Did you want to share those?
Sure. So part of our discussion today has been the recruitment for the coordinator position that we had, and we've actually had that position posted since late January of this year. We posted it 3 different times, and actually under 2 different job descriptions.
Different job boards, so
Well,
like
yeah.
Indeed, Beyond EdJoin, like going outside of the educational space trying to recruit.
And we still have not got any applicants. We received probably a dozen applicants in total over this span of time. So we talked with Robert again today about revising the job description. Part of it, I think, is the title. When people do searches, they're not finding, whether it's financial or budget or, but the other part of it is I think we're not really paying competitively within that particular title. It used to be an executive director position and where it sits right now. So we're looking at going back towards a director position. So not the executive director, but a director position in order to try to help return that.
Yeah.
Hire and retain somebody for this position. So.
Because of the applicants that we've received for the position, none of them met the minimum criteria for the position. And so we've really struggled with trying to fill the position. And so, they say the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. And we've got to do better than that. And so I think we had a great call today to really try to move that forward.
Right, so we hope to read the revised job description back to the board. I think we're shooting for the 4th.
The
Fifth, I'm sorry.
October 5th.
To do that, and once it's approved, then we'll be able to post that job.
The executive director, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused.
Yes,
Because the agenda item said an applicant,
No,
status
this
of
is-
applicants for CBOC. going
So
forward.
they're just following the financial.
Oh, for the staff report. So typically
Oh,
at this
okay,
section, we
okay,
would
okay.
present the staff financial reports and we don't have them. But instead of leaving it
Okay.
off the agenda, we thought it was really important that we bring you the most up-to-date information.
Gotcha.
And we still don't have that position filled. And so this
Okay.
is some of our strategy to try to really improve on the delivery and timeliness of those reports.
and one of the things we did get from Robert today was a commitment. Now that the fiscal year has been closed, is to get some time from Sinja to work with. We do have a person here on the contract side that's been working on the reports, and he'll be the individual that's actually producing these reports. But there are some roadblocks along the way, and the person calls Sakita a lot of things to Sinja. And so we did get a commitment from Robert to dedicate some time of hers now in order to try to get those problems resolved. And so we get these reports delivered back to the public.
Yeah, and now the one last item, which is on the next page, was the status of applicants to CBOC and Lewiston. I talked to, we still have the one individual that, before the last meeting, I think had applied.
Right, and so I was trying to arrange to get an interview set up. I have reached out to this individual to make contact. I've not heard back from her as of today. But unfortunately, I don't have a phone number, so we're trying to email back and forth. as soon as I get that, I'm hoping to talk with her and connect with John and possibly another member and see if we can do a quick interview and see if the candidate's gonna align and get her onto the board agenda. For approval. And then on Monday, Ellen and I are presenting at the Bayside PTA. The district is actually doing an overall presentation, but part of that will be facilities. And part of that will be a plea to them to see if we can recruit candidates.
Mhm. Have, Jason has been missing from how many meetings? This is,
I think this is second in a row, right? But last time he had an emergency that he couldn't attend and.
Yeah, and then
Business
when we
conflict.
didn't have a quorum one time, we didn't meet. And I think Jason was not here on that one. But anyway, we had a meeting for the annual report and he was telling me how busy he is. I don't want it to turn into another Joe Camacho where we follow through months and have, no contact. Maybe you could contact him and see.
Sure. I feel like he's been a good member and he keeps us informed, so I don't believe that he's doing.
Yeah, he's kept as far as
But I will reach out.
as soon as we, I send an email to the 4 CBOC members on Friday, and I haven't got a response from him the next morning, so he keeps us posted.
Yeah, but he couldn't come. That's,
Yeah, well, that's-
we need worker bees.
So anyway, okay, with that, thank you, and now, Lorraine, you wanted some time for the annual report, and
Yeah, I just wanted to
under,
update.
and I put a bunch of, you sent me a number of attachments on, I believe, Wednesday night.
Yeah,
I posted them out there, I don't know whether you wanted to speak from them or not, or.
yeah, but that's a different title. So let me do the annual report, just bring it up.
Okay.
If you would go to, now in the agenda, it was page 39, but it's the chart that I had there.
It's
Now, can you enlarge that?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. This is just to refresh people's mind. This is a transition chart from before we had when we had the annual calendar to when we're going to be the fiscal calendar. And I put the first two columns there, 2019, 2020, that's the old method we did. And 2023, all the way on the right, is what it'll look like once we've been through the transition. And the transition's going to be 2 periods. In 21 is going to be just the performance evaluation, the compliance statement. Whereas in 2022, it's going to be from January 21 to the fiscal end of the fiscal 22, and that's going to be the other reports, the ones that I asked for, and et cetera. So I just wanted to refresh you what we're looking at. So the next page, we'll talk, yeah, this is on for the 21, and we had a resolution to bring these in line. And you see down about the middle of it, you see timetable, timeline. And this is how we were planning to get the performance and financial audits through and have the board approve them or accept them, whichever. And so August 9th, they had not been they were on the agenda and the audits were pulled from the agenda. And then on the update is on August 24th's meeting. They rescheduled the audits. And then on September's 9th, yesterday, or just this week's one, they were not on the agenda again. So do you have any idea when they're planning on looking at that?
Yeah, so the reason they weren't on the last agenda is the night that they got pulled off. I was contacted by one of the auditors and they let me know that they could not make the following board meeting. So there was,
Oh, so it was the auditors could
Yeah.
make it.
yeah, they couldn't make the meeting. That's
Yeah.
why they were not re-agendized for the following.
Uh-huh.
So our intent is to bring them back. We need to reach out to our auditors again. But we've also had problems with items on the board agenda. they've been so full that
Yeah, yeah,
everything keeps getting bumped, so it's hard to get a commitment and then have our auditors wait one more time again, and then, you know, with the chance of being pulled.
mhm. Yeah.
So if they're not gonna make next week's, it'll be the following meeting coming up.
Oh, and I noticed when I looked at the agenda for the no, August 24th, that you guys had added a part to the program, which
Yes.
I thank you. It has the where we sent it to the auditor, et cetera, controller and all. It'd been nice if you told us you did it, you know, just so we could look at it, because we did not know that that was on there. I just happened to hit on it.
So
And
the
s-
other thing that we did, because we're trying to always get better,
Huh.
is we went to the statute and we saw that the word from statute is to receive the audit.
Yeah.
And so we made that change in the precies as well.
Oh, okay, good.
So, but those were the minor changes, and it's our intention to bring that same form for the next meeting as soon as we know we can make the meeting.
Oh, good, great, great. And so that takes care of the 21 annual report period. Then the next one is for the 22 reports. And this is just that's the transitional period again. And these are documents that are needed for that. Go down a little bit. Go to where it says district documents. No, it's up, it's up.
41.
It's about the second breakout. Yeah, district documents needed. And you see that the audits we have or this is for the 21, now 22 is the next down. That's 21.
This is needed for.
Yeah, 22, you're right, yeah.
Okay.
The asterisk means I've got it. So
Okay.
I've got the financial report from the 13 because it was in the last
Mhm.
2020.
Mhm.
These are the others, and I got an update, and the estimated tax. I also asked for the KPI. And I just happened to think tonight, I was wondering if, you know, you just started selling the bonds. And I know you had to get a waiver so that it could be $60 per 100,000 valuation of the house. And I was just wondering if you could give me a copy of that waiver that you did receive, so you could charge more for it.
So I've definitely made the note. One of the things that we did to try to make sure that we document and capture all of the requests that have come through is we've added these reports that you've identified to our Public Records Act request log, which is part of the consent agenda, so we can track all of the documents that are requested, who it's
Okay.
been assigned to, and when we're able to provide that to you so that we don't lose something along
That's
the way.
great.
And
Great.
so I've made this note, and I'll make sure to work with Sylvia on that item, but
Okay.
it is really helpful when you put into writing what you're requesting
Yes, I
from
can-
us,
I'll
and
send
then
an
our
email.
commitment
Yeah.
is to make sure to track that and bring that to every meeting, the status of those requests.
Yeah, and Sylvia's been very helpful. I asked her if she would just copy me on it when she sends it. So I know it's into the system, you know, I noticed on the record, it said who it went to in the system, which is real good. Just to keep track
Yeah.
of it, that's all.
Or just for my own clarification items, the report 13 and 13A for time frame ending 6/30/22.
Yeah.
And the other financial reports, those have also been.
Well, they won't come
slower
out
because
until,
we, as.
They are the same reports. so
But
they'll-
Mhm.
they'll
we
come next
just
month.
discussed relative to the
Yeah.
financials and the staff.
Yeah.
report,
and what they used to do, they had to make a special
Right,
form for the calendar. So this would be just to catch us up on
Yep.
the others for the next. And then also on the next page, Sylvia has gotten me this material here, so that's fine. And I did get a note back saying this financial are still pending, so once we get that, we'll be in good shape. Okay, thank you. That's for the update on the annual report. The
did you have anything else?
not for the annual report update. I did have a meeting with Jason. We had one meeting, but
Okay. All right, thank you, Laura.
Could I
Lane?
share one thing just really quickly? So there was a fantastic chart that you made about the financial reports updated to the website, what's uploaded. And so we're working with the team.
Oh, yeah.
To get all of that resolved. And
Okay.
so as soon as we have gone through the notes, then we'll send correspondence confirming the changes that are made so that you'll know those are ready.
Good, that comes under the H. Which is, what happened was I sent these to, yeah.
Okay, so
I sent them,
okay.
no, I sent them, and, I think he said, well, I remember these from last year. Remember I said last meeting, things are falling through the cracks. We have to, and that's red flag issues, you know, so you know, to look into it. So the next section is not, it was brought up under the BP, talking about the BP,
Mhm.
but the title there is a little different. So these are just reports that we've had, and we'll start on the one above, FAI. We have the FAI report.
Could you reference this in the, as a page number in the,
45.
okay, thank you.
It's
Yeah.
45 to 46.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the FAI, and none of us were on the committee when and I don't even know if I don't think you two were here. When this happened, they had a whistleblower who worked here for 11 years. And he made accusations about waste, fraud, and abuse. So the district in 2016 hired the company of Vincetti, Lloyd, and Stutzman to do an audit, a forensic accounting investigation into his allegations. He had 62 of them. And they found 112 recommendations on how to reduce the risk of it. So that was the start of it. The board also set up in 2016 an implementation task force to monitor this so that when the recommendations were implemented, they would make sure that they would be audited, and they hired an outside reviewer to do it. So the district said, all right, we have 62 implemented recommendations, and then Moss Adams was the one who came in. And he looked at it and he said, well, actually we say they're 33, you know, so that's what he was doing. He was reviewing it. And that was phase 1 of it. That was completed in June 2017. Then,
Actually, I was here for that.
oh, were you here? Okay.
And Lewis and I were here as well.
Oh, good. And then, the next step was when we heard was in, 2020 came out a report, and it said that what had progressed, et cetera, you know, your one with your round chart on it, et cetera. And on that one, they said that I think they said the objectives were, should be ready in October of 2020. So that's the next line that we sort of missed. Okay, then you hired Eddie Bailey and Moss Adams. Bailey was to do the 1.5, which would be the ones that Moss Hart said were not implemented.
Moss Adams.
Or I don't know why I keep saying Moss Hart. Moss Adams, and the 29 that was from a performance evaluation. Remember, we went from the Proposition 39, we went into Proposition 39 only rather than the performance one. And there were some waiting to get in. So that's the one that the 1.5 phase. Moss Adams was to do the 2.0, which are the 50 that never got said they were finished. So the review was supposed to be done 5/17/21. So that was not met. Then there was a report come out aligning bond audits to our practice part 2. And that was presented at our meeting on 5/9/22, and they said it would come out in the summer of 22. It's now the fall of 22, and what they originally thought would take 2 years to complete, it's now been 6 years or so. So what is the status of this? When, I mean, you went through and you did an excellent job on the PMP and that helped. And the Colby, what do you know? But or have they let the contracts or are the two companies looking into it? What?
They are, so for phase 1.5, there's just a handful of items that have come back that they're seeking additional records for. The challenge with the records is one, it spans back many years. Two, it comes from various places. So it's not just records that we hold. And so the 112 recommendations were assigned to different departments. And so they're both completely active. So there are records that we owe to both ID Bailey and to Moss Adams for phase 1.5 and for phase 2.0. Interestingly enough, one of the recommendations, one of the 112 recommendations is the CBOC policy.
Yeah.
It's updating the CBOC policy, which is an item that we're gonna get to here pretty soon. And so it is not that every single item has been implemented. There's a couple of policy items, the CBOC policy being one of them. And so
On the website.
being able to move that forward would really help because that's another one off the list and additional documents that we could provide the auditors.
Well, is it, you don't have personnel to do it or what? Why? I mean, 6 years is a long time.
6 years is a long time.
Our plan is to finish getting the auditors and insurance
Mhm.
and try
Yeah.
to get it done.
I know the last superintendent wanted to get this over, but yeah,
I think all of us wanted to get it over with.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem. I didn't want to jump in if
Yeah.
you weren't done yet.
No,
but
I'm
I
done.
do have a question. Okay. In this report, before we got to 1.5 and 2.0, et cetera, for the 112 BLS recommendations in one of our annual reports, can't remember exactly which one, we identified or BLS had to some degree identified their higher priority risk items without, they couldn't call them higher priority, but anyway, as close as they could get. And, so for a while you were tracking that, Melissa, if I remember correctly, you know, which of those super high priority and when they described what the high priority was, they said there is definitely fraud risk and you know, it was pretty clear that they thought that that these particular ones needed to be addressed. I don't have the statistics in front of me that says of the 112, how many of those were considered high risk, how many were medium risk, et cetera. So are you still tracking that kind of thing? And are there any high risk ones, as Lorraine says, 6 years later, still languishing?
So I don't believe so, but I don't want to misspeak. And so what I'd like to do is provide that response in writing.
Okay.
And I can provide that in advance of the next meeting so that you have that information. You know, the information is only as good as the last time you looked at it. And so, but I'd be happy to provide that in writing as a response to the committee.
There's not a lot of, you know, if you have to prioritize your time in terms of how you're gonna respond to Lorraine's question, I would really focus on those high risk.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and the website and the board policy were both high risk.
Okay, thank you.
The next one deals with financial audit or the financial reports. I think you had that chart with, yeah. Yeah, and go up a little bit, down a little bit. These are listed up above, it's just a summary of what we usually get in our financial packet. While you were addressing the idea of the salaries, you started giving us the pay data. And also we would, another thing that's not listed on here would be our change orders. We used to get change order listings. So what I did was I just went through, down you can see the chart below, And I think it's an excellent idea that you have the reports on the website.
Mhm.
And at first we had a little trouble because it was locked in. You had to have a password, but we solved that.
Mhm.
So I just went down there, 3 years of data there. Year 20, could you enlarge that as much as you can? Yeah, 2020, 2021, they're archived, and then 22 is this year's. So you see the 3 years, and then you have the report types up top. 3 years for report 2 for the consolidated ones. You see along the top, the consolidated R just is in 22 because that didn't start till 22. And I just went through and said, was it there? Was it not there? Yes means it was there. And there's some fine tuning, like you said, you're gonna have to do on it, like, in 22 underneath the, report 2, there's a, N there. That's because it was a bid document. Somebody who put it in, just put in the wrong
It
one.
was
So
a
that's,
clerical error.
but it was
yeah.
it was in our packet though, it was in our agenda packet. And when you look at the, under report 13A, you'll see a lot of little asterisks down there. And that's because whoever put the data in, they put in report 13 again. That's not 13A. But in our agenda packets, we have it, so the documents are there. What concerned me is when you look at the columns, you'll see under each report for 20 and 21, it's all Ys. For 22, we got it for January, there are Ys all across there. But then after that, there are no reports. And that's 6 months of no financial reports.
Mhm.
Now, in the Ed Code, that talks about the CBOC, the chapter title under that is Strict Accountability in Local School Construction Bond Act, 2000. And, so that they want control, they want, and in the code under general areas, it talks about vigorous. It says it's 15264 is the Ed Code. And it says, it is the intent of the legislature that all the following are realized. A, vigorous efforts are undertaken to ensure that the expenditure of bond measures, including those authorized pursuant to paragraph, the statute, are in strict conformity with the law. Part C says, the members of the Oversight Committee appointed pursuant to this chapter promptly alert the public to any waste or improper expenditure of school construction bond money. D, the reason for that is the unauthorized expenditures of school construction bond revenues are vigorously investigated, prosecuted, and that the courts act swiftly to restrain any improper expenditures. Now we get the financial audit. The financial audit comes out 9 months after the data is done. So this is what we need
Mhm.
to do vigorous oversight. And it's been a problem because of the fiscal coordinator position. But you're still writing checks. You're still following on. And with Colby, wasn't the point of Colby, because it'd make much easier to get these reports out. And somebody's got to start doing them so we can look over it, or we cannot do our job. And the whole point of this committee is for fiscal waste, fraud, and abuse.
Mhm.
So I think it is urgent that we get somebody doing these reports for us.
Absolutely, we
Yeah.
agree.
The next one is the change order. Yeah, this was from last night's September 7th. And the change orders, was that passed, by the way? Did they pass that?
They
Yes.
did.
Oh, good. So this is what we would get in our report before, just that little box with telling us what the change orders are. So the reports are being generated, we're not getting them. So why don't we get this report? It wouldn't be hard. Also, one thing that hit me, red flag, is that this is for the fields at, Pinole. And you see the total change orders are $1,400,000. That's, now red flag goes up immediately when I see that, so I want to know what's the story on this. You explained part of it tonight with the construction, but the committee should get some reports. If there are any delayed construction, we're supposed to get a report. If, our problem is we don't have enough people to filter this out. You don't have enough people to do the reports. So we've got to increase personnel on both ends to do an adequate job. And another thing I thought was interesting is that down, underneath that dark financial impact, 329,000, that's the, for this change order particularly. To funded by Fund 21. Now, Fund 21 used to be like a flow-through fund. But
Fund
you
21
have,
is the bond.
almost $500,000 you can pull out of that fund. I'd like to know more about that fund.
So Fund 21 is the bond fund. I think you're thinking of Fund 35.
Maybe,
So
yeah,
Fund 35 was when we received state dollars,
Mhm.
they would go to Fund 35 and then move through to Fund 21, but Fund 21 is the bond fund.
Mhm.
And so that is where all of the dollars for the measures for which we've sold are
Okay.
held.
All right, so Fund 21 is the bond, and that would be in, C and D bonds are covered, Pinole?
D&E.
Yeah, and can you scroll, or I've got it right here, so you can see that this is 21-9748, so that lets us know that it's Measure E.
Yeah.
So the 4 digits that come after 21, they tell you which bond measure is the resource for that fund and those dollars.
Oh, okay. Could we get a key for that?
Sure.
I appreciate that, yeah. And I remember years ago, I came to some meetings and at that point, they weren't, the change orders, they had more than one that was $1 million. They were hitting high levels. And they started monitoring them at that point.
So-
Now we don't monitor anymore.
Well, actually, they are on the reports that are given by Ellen. And so this information
Yeah.
is on the project status report.
Well, if you look down below, I went back to the project status reports and these are the ones that we had. And I thought maybe my math is wrong, but I thought it would build up to that 1,400,000. It came out to like 1,800,000, but I think there should be some notation when you see a total bond change orders for a project. In other words, like you have it in the little square there, maybe that should be in the status report somewhere. But just look at that and see if you could clarify it a little bit on that project.
So I have another question going back to, this is only for the fields, correct?
That's correct.
So you have, Lorraine, the dollar jumped out to her. I look at the 9% change order, to me, it seems high.
Yeah.
Typically, people shoot for no more than 5.
Yeah.
And they pat themselves on the back when they come in less than 5.
And
Right.
there were 2 change orders that night. One was less than 10% and your cutoff is 10% or $250,000. This had to get special approval from the board. But yeah, it's a high one.
But you also have the change conditions that factor into this, which is
Yeah,
different.
trust me, we don't like to see
The
that.
quote unquote design changes.
We don't like to see the 9% either.
Yeah,
We've had some extenuating circumstances on this project and sometimes those happen. And, we're trying to do our best to reach that number and work within the budget that's on this project. And so that's why you do see the note that they are within the project budget.
Mhm.
But we're not asking to increase the budgets. We're asking for approval of the change orders, but they are within the project budget itself.
yeah.
You mean the total school project budget? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
So something else had to give, so to speak.
No, well, I mean, the total budget, I think we were at 2.
So Pinole has, the project budget for Pinole, I believe it's 216 million, and it has so many different phases. So we had the demo phase and then the temporary campus and then the new campus building. And so all of that's reported on report 2 along the Pinole Valley High School line. So yes, in that this is the last phase of Pinole. And so the dollars that remain within that project budget are for this project.
But I think the other point you were making is when Lewis was making was when you put the whole Pinole project, the other 250 million,
16, yes.
200, your change order percentage isn't going to be 9%. It's going to be.
Well,
much
we don't
lower.
ever really do that, take the whole project,
Oh.
the
You don't look at it from
where's
a
the
it's on a
macro
project by
standpoint.
project basis,
I'm confused. I'm still confused. So that, are you saying that the total change order, $1.4 million? What didn't get 1.4? If your budget didn't change, which budget didn't change? The school budget
Well, we have
didn't
a
change
contract and we have a budget, right? So we have our.
for the school.
For
For the school, but
project.
for the Fields project as well. There's a budget for the Fields project,
Yeah.
which is this piece of the overall school
Okay.
rebuild.
Yeah,
And so we're within the budget for the Fields work.
field, okay.
So we have a contract for 15, which is now
Now it's
16
16 something.
million, and we have a project budget, and those change orders are coming from the project budget.
Okay.
We
And so the-
typically have
You hold a
additional
reserve.
space
You
between.
hold a reserve. You
Yeah.
got a contractor mark that you agree with the contractor on, and then you hold another pocket, another amount of the authorized funds from the
Right,
district
and I think there's
as to cover your contingencies.
and what Ellen was pointing out earlier is the difference between like Lake, where it's a design build project.
Mhm.
It has a contingency within the contract, and so those change orders come from the contingency within the contract versus this is a contract and we have the budget outside of the contract.
Well, it seems like I remember there was discussion about the overall budget and where it was being quote unquote held whenever there was an overage. That was a tough one. I mean, I didn't ever see it held either at the individual project level or the school level or the total level. And that was bothersome to me, honestly. So because then you'd have to go back to the board and ask them to increase something, either the school budget or the total budget in order to make up for, change orders across the board, not just this school, not just this project, but a lot of projects.
Well, maybe one of the things that we could do, it's so hard to do it without the financial reports. And
Yeah.
so since we'll be
That was
bringing
kind of what
those.
report 13A was supposed to help.
And so one of the things that I would love to do is maybe answer some of these questions when we have the reports next month, and maybe we'll walk through Pinole. So you can see the reporting for the different phases, but then also see the budget for this particular phase and how that's broken out into
Yeah.
the system.
I think that just illustrates what Lorraine has been saying, that how many months have we not had these reports? We kind of lose track of it. I can remember back in report 13A and stuff like that, and how we were tracking it, we understood it, and we had good dialogue, but we've lost a lot of that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. Along that line, in the documentation for the board policy, I think it is, or one of the resolutions we're doing, they have the grand jury report, the one from 2015 that was stymied oversight. In that, one of the specific remarks was they were not getting financial reports. They didn't get it for 3 years. And nobody said it. I don't know why nobody said, but they didn't get it for 3 years. And it said, how can you possibly do a program if you don't have the financial reports? So it looks like we're slipping back into that again. So it encourages me that you had to talk with Dr. McIntyre about it, but we've got to get something going.
Absolutely. And I want to say that we don't take this lightly. We're extremely concerned about this. We're all very uncomfortable. But I do think that we talked about some good strategy today, and part of that really included having comprehensive procedure to support the ongoing production of the reports, right? One of the things that we know is people can change, right? And so how do we make sure that if there is a change, that we don't fall backwards? And so we know that we need to deliver the reports. We know that we need to fill that position, a couple of positions, and we know that we need to have a way forward so that in the event that somebody isn't here that has been doing it, that someone else can step up immediately and continue on that work.
Mhm, right, right. And then the next one, or we don't, that, the next one is prioritization for Measure R.
And keep going.
Okay. Now, this is, remember we had that report given to us where the board had asked you to do an estimate of what the projects would be. And the first line, could you enlarge that a little bit, please? Yeah. This is from the 2016 FMP. And you have that, you had a chart in it and it was unfunded projects and you listed all 21 projects, how much it would run. And these were the amounts that were listed for Richmond, Kennedy and Stedge. Now, the work that you just recently did was Richmond High, and you said Kennedy was similar. And you see that this was, Richmond was 119.2 million. In your report, for the master plan, up a little bit more, keep going. You see that now you have three possibilities. The cheapest is 363 million. Now, I know in our annual reports in the past, we had said that the ROM was like 5%. They expected 5%, but even back in 2020, they saw there was more than it was about 15%. This is about a 40% increase. You know, I mean, this is a tremendous increase over that. Now, either have they increased what you want to put in it? Has that increased? I can't imagine that's just inflation and that much more.
I think you're right. I mean, what was in the master plan was a modernization of the facility with some rebuild, right? What we brought before the board, what we're asked to do was go back and look at what it would cost to tear down and put up a new school and a hybrid, which would be, you know, some modernization and new construction, but mostly new construction. So they're not the same. So that is part of the discussion we're having with the board, is the realization the numbers are much higher than anticipated. That there's not capacity to rebuild both schools, but that we have to come with the realization of what the dollars are available, what project costs are today, and come back with a budget that can be our scope that can be, you know, achieved.
Right.
Both campuses or one campus or whatever the desire is at this time.
Yeah, these are high schools. They're not junior colleges. You know, I mean, it might be, needs and wants may be different. But what worries me is that in Measure R, you stated that you would have all 21 projects, the $575 million. It's down lower. If you go a little lower, the actual wording is there. Let's see. That, just keep going past that. That's John's, my letter to John. Here you go. The wording in R says, while any project included on this project list may be undertaken at any of the district schools or sites, the district has identified 21 priority schools, and that you listed the schools on the measure. The allocation of bond proceeds will be affected by the district's receipt of state matching funds and final costs of each project. In the absence of state matching funds, which the district will aggressively pursue to reduce the district's share of the costs of the projects, the district may not be able to complete all of the projects listed above. The budget for each project is an estimate and may be affected by factors beyond the district's control. Well, you had 21, I think it was misleading because your bond issue was for $575 million. From your 2016 account, it would have taken $1,119,000 to
And
do
that
it.
was identified. So it was never the intent to do all 21 schools because there was never funding. to
But
do
the impression is it, because you listed them all, and you're saying right here that if we get matching funds, now have you ever gotten that much matching funds?
We do get state matching dollars, but it was never the intent that you would get all the way through the list. So what was our bond, what was our ability to sell bonds? That's why we had folks come in that tested what the capacity would be and what the rate would be.
Mhm.
And the board approved the amount of what the bond would be, that we move forward with Measure R.
I'm just thinking that the taxpayers are going to see this Measure R. They saw the 21 schools. And then they find out they may get 1.5 made with that money. You know, I don't know how much they're going to say, well, yeah, keep doing it the next time you put it. Your credibility maybe. So I think I don't know, in my mind, you've got to cut back on the costs of these schools. I don't know how or what the board's going to have to decide that. But as far as discussing with the board, I haven't seen it on the agenda. I know at that meeting, when we got the thing, you said it comes up for board's approval. Well, in your status tonight, it's still pending board approval, and I haven't seen it on any agenda. So what discussions are you having?
We are working on a date to meet with the board. And
Yeah.
So,
So they don't know that it's this much.
no, this information is public. It's been presented out there. And we're trying to schedule a meeting with the board
Mm.
to go through this so we can get some direction and begin the process of moving forward.
Okay, these are just red flags that are going up, so I want to look into it. To make sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go
that's all right. So I'll tag on to this because it's pretty obvious to anybody that looks at these numbers, exactly what Lorraine is saying. You're way off the chart in terms of the master plan. So the master plan is, I don't know how the master plan is characterized or viewed inside the district. But in any case, the other thing that was said in Measure R, besides this, is that you would have a quote, independent CBOC in place that was capable of strict citizens accountability. And those words are right there in all caps. This is the CBOC now, which is non-compliant. No, nobody could call it anything but. So if you have to go back to the voters with those types of promises unkept, both in terms of the number of schools that you're going to address, exactly what Lorraine is saying. Whether you say, well, we said 21 schools, but we really didn't mean it. Or we said independent CBOC with strict accountability, but not really. Do you really think the voters are going to support that? It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And I know that the three of you that we're looking at here, you do not have control over this. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the work that you do. Honestly. You're caught in a bind. And we're caught in a bind.
So that's all the red flags I have for tonight.
Does anybody that go ahead? No? Okay, well, thanks, Lorraine.
Mhm.
Let's get on to the next item now. Last session, we had a presentation of the ad hoc committee's draft citizens board, citizens bond oversight committee board policy draft. We had quite a bit of discussion. There have been, I've got some comments posted in the agenda that we received from Lorraine. In addition, yesterday, there were comments that came in from Mr. Gosney that also need to get posted in the minutes as a means of having them in the record. But with that, I think the path forward is for the CBOC to recommend the board consider the draft we have now and take into consideration the comments on the draft produced by the ad hoc committee.
So what I did was based on the last meeting that we had, there were some comments that we talked about based on the written comments from Lorraine.
Okay.
And so I'm sharing here, I tracked those changes and I reflected them here. I listened to our last CBOC meeting. I gotta tell you, it's really hard to listen to the sound of your voice. But I went back through, listened to the meeting and really tried to make sure that I captured what we talked about and what I've seen reflected in the notes. And so I've added both the within 3 months of receiving the audit, which comes from statute, and identified the statute. I did that under both the performance and the financial audit in the same way. Tried to really focus on consistency. So the way that we identified statute in other sections, really tried to keep that uniform. At the last meeting, we heard the question about legal counsel. So I did share with legal counsel, and interestingly enough, this statute referenced here 17,584.1 was repealed back in July of 2013. It's actually really interesting. So this exact language shows up in Ed Code 15278, including that reference. However, that specific code section 17,584.1 was repealed back in July of 2013. So we've kept the integrity of the intent and added just or reports. The only thing that we're removing is the repealed statute. And so kind of walking through here. The other change, sorry, there's a little bit of delay. This was our big grammatical resolution, which was amazing. So that's reflected there. And then the other note from council was to be sure to indicate 60 calendar days. So that has been reflected. And then at the very beginning of the policy, it defines the CBOC committee as committee. And so this is just cleanup. So you'll see that in a couple of sections, but it is in no way a material revision to the policy. Similarly, that was done with CBOC liaison, which is a defined term. We've created a CBOC liaison, we've designated that. And so this was also just a cleanup, but not a material revision to the policy itself. And this is the last revision here. And this was a recommendation from legal counsel, but it doesn't change it. It's just cleaning up the language. And I think it better states what the intention was. I know that this should have been in the packet. I know that you don't want to hear that I sprained my ankle and I missed a bunch of work, and it turns out spraining your ankle is way worse than it should be. But I've always been completely honest with you, and I take the comments here so seriously. I really do. And I feel terrible that this didn't make the packet and that we didn't do a better job, but I simply ran out of time. But I bring this tonight. I know we talked about these at the last meeting. I've tried to capture all of them here, both from my notes from the meeting on YouTube itself. And I wanted it to be able to be on the screen, and so, you know, I want to turn this back over to the committee, but these are the written comments for this policy that are received and are identified here. So how you would like to go through them now, one by one, et cetera, but that's what's been captured in this document.
I think we can, it's just a thought, we can amend the resolution, right? To take what was presented to us
Yes,
with the amendment as presented tonight.
Yeah.
And vote on that.
and there is the, you have the draft of resolution, which is mislabeled. It should be 003 rather than zero, at the very top. The very start of it. The title
Oh,
should be number 2203.
okay. What page?
I believe this is on page 116. Well, that's the cover page, so I guess 117.
I have a question about the procedure here. Now,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
the first one, I think you said last time, that was the first reading. You have, I know with the governance committee, when they go before the board, they have a first reading and a second read. We don't do anything with the governance. It's not needed to do anything with the governance committee.
So
See, they're doing policy. They're talking about board policy.
We're talking about a draft that we're submitting to the board for their
Okay,
consideration.
all right. So now, will Don's, you know, like you went through the ones that were written and all, and Don had some more that added. Is the time too late to accept those, or would they go to the board?
I would propose they go to the board. They go to the board with
Yeah.
public comments. On the-
I don't want them just to be ignored, so.
absolutely, so they'll be attached
They'll be
to,
attached to any, the document that goes from the committee to the ad hoc committee to the board.
yes, and any other comments that are received between this evening and that reading to the board. And so typically, draft policy goes before the board the first time for discussion, and then it comes back for a second reading for action.
Okay, good. So we're just voting on a draft to be sent to the board
For their
Yes.
for
consideration.
their
yes.
consideration, okay. And
So are we ready to make a motion and then discuss?
Yes. You want-
Okay. Well, then I move that WCCUSD, CBOC recommends that WCCUSD's Board of Education. I'm starting with the resolution. Does
Okay.
anybody want me to reread this thing again? Because I read it. the first time.
I would say that now be it resolved would, to me, would be appropriate, because there are no changes
There are no changes.
except in the
Resolution.
actual resolution itself.
Okay. So now, therefore, be it resolved that WCCUSD CBOC recommends that WCCUSD's Board of Education consider adopting the revised CBOC Board Policy 7214.2 attached to this resolution, and I want to add, as amended by Melissa Payne at this meeting. This policy was drafted by an ad hoc subcommittee made up of 2 district staff and 2 CBOC members.
Have a second
I'll second.
discussion, any further discussion? Do we have any hands raised?
We have Don's hand, is that?
Don?
Thank you. I promised in my email last night that I would not belabor this point. I know it's a moot point. It doesn't matter what I say here tonight, but I do want to go on record saying that while I appreciate all the work and effort done by both the staff people and the ad hoc committee. I wish that it had been done in public. As if there was a process as it was done the last time that we tried to do this over a 2.5 year period where everything was public in every way, shape, and form. That way it could be adjusted and dealt with on an individual basis as it was happening, not as a full document on there. I see a lot of good things in here, but more importantly, I see things that I disagree with completely. And it's not so much what is in this board policy, it is what was taken out of the board policy that the current board policy and taken out of the one that was worked on by this CBOC and staff and the superintendent and board members for 2.5 years. That is the biggest thing. But I said, we could go on and on for days and days about this thing because it's a lot of information, but it's also the kind of thing that we need to be able to sit down there and be able to compare different versions of it and the exact language. And this just not, a meeting like this just doesn't fit into that. But I just want to go on record saying I disagree with this. It will be dealt with at a different avenue. But this is not representing our community the way it should, in my opinion. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other hands raised?
Can we make a comment to that?
Go ahead.
My comment back to that is an excellent point. And what happens from here on, as this policy goes to the Board of Education, is, I would imagine, I don't know if they're going to do it publicly or not. But that's where the next public comments can be made. And presumably, it will be public. So we have no control over what the board will ultimately vote on. That's the reality of it. We're just presenting this as our best effort at something to consider. They can certainly consider what was the existing policy and the changes made over 2.5 years. They can also consider that.
Don, your hand is still up.
Well, it's up a second time, but Anton was up before me this time around. I don't want to step in front of him.
Don,
You're not, you're muted, Anton, I think.
This is Anton Young here. My comments that I made at the last meeting were not reflected in the minutes. That's disappointing. I think the thought of a CBOC of 17 members, currently with 4 active members, not compliant with the law, making a recommendation to the school board on a policy that will make the CBOC not an independent CBOC. I do not understand why you would want to make a recommendation to the board on a policy that will not provide for an independent CBOC. And the rationale appears to be, well, this is the best we can do, and we'll let somebody else deal with it at the board level. I think this is outrageous that you would consider taking this type of action tonight, particularly in light of the resolution that immediately follows this on the agenda, where you're proposing that you go out of business until the board makes a legally standing CBOC and provides for a independent CBOC. So I don't understand why you would even consider this in light of the proposed resolution that immediately follows it. Again, for you, a CBOC which is not legally compliant with the state statute, and furthermore, as Sally has pointed out numerous times, not compliant with the own board measure adopted by the voters 3 times in the school district. So I think this resolution should be tabled. It should be not voted on tonight. and that you should move on to your next resolution. It's the end of my report.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much. I just want to address something that Sally did say. I fully expect that if this does come before the board, that it will be done in public. There's no question in my mind about that. But their version of public at a board meeting is not quite the same as here. And I appreciate the fact that we can actually have a discussion. It may still be stilted, but at least I haven't been staring at a clock, and I truly do appreciate the fact that I don't have somebody cutting me off and saying your time is up. But when this comes before the board, the public will be given 2 minutes to discuss a document that is a radical document like this that will govern the oversight of the bond program for another 8 or 10 years at least. They'll have 2 minutes to do that, 2.5 or 3 hours before the presentation, even before they hear anything from staff, before they hear anything from the other board members. That's not public. That's not transparent at all. It requires us to be able to try to lobby the individual board members, but that is extremely difficult too. They are very difficult to get a hold of. They've got a full life themselves. Some of them actually have day jobs. And it makes it very difficult to get a hold of them and devote the kind of attention. This is not a 5-minute phone call. This is a multi-hour discussion. And you go over point by point with an individual board member, and you try doing that with multiple board members. It is very difficult on this. And I want to remind everybody that weren't paying attention at the time, when the original draft that we had that the CBOC put before the board came before them, there were 2 board members in particular. One of them hated the CBOC. You might recall she actually interrupted a presentation and chewed us out at one of our CBOC meetings. Then you had 2 others that did not like the idea that the word independent was included in the board policy so many times. They didn't like the idea that we didn't work for them. Even though we're supposed to be looking over their shoulders, they wanted us to do what they told us to do. So it was dead on arrival when it showed up to them. That was a difficult thing. And of course, we didn't have a discussion about that because they were making all their comments after the public discussion. That's their version of what a public actually means. So it makes it very difficult here. But I said, this could be a lot better. And I objected when the facilities committee flat out refused to allow persons like myself, Anton Younghair, and Tom Panis, with a combined 53 years of experience with the bond program, to participate in their discussions. And I also objected to the idea that the CBOC rejected the same kind of thing, as they had their ad hoc committee, and it did not want to consult with anybody that had the history, that had been here forever and ever and understood how the bond program worked and how the district had worked, about that forensic investigation that Lorraine was talking about earlier. Those of us that were here, ones that could point out how bad it was. None of that mattered. You're dealing with fresh people, and some of these people have their own agendas. Thank you very much.
Anton, you still have your hand up?
Yes, sir. In the resolution, the resolve, it says that the proposed draft is attached. Where is that attachment? What page number?
It will be attached after it is approved, but the policy, draft policy is on page 54 through 65. Sorry.
How does the reader,
Through
how does the public aware of that?
excuse me,
I don't believe this meets the requirement of the Brown Act. You don't have the attachment to the resolution. It's not noted in the packet, and you proposed amendments orally, which were not given to the public or the CBOC. So if you proceed with this, you're going to have a Brown Act violation, clearly. You cannot tell me on page 118 that there's an attachment to this resolution and then tell me at the meeting, oh, the attachment's on page 63. I'm supposed to know that, right? It's outrageous. This does not comply with the Brown Act. It's not transparent. It's the end of my comment.
What about the idea of tabling the vote until Melissa gets the actual rewording of the draft? And then we could send
When
it
are
over
we gonna have the next vote then?
the next time we meet.
Could do a special meeting.
Pardon?
Well, it sort of depends on, 22-04, but I'm good with that.
Yeah.
You know. And then,
I don't see it that it's a violation, because what we are talking about here in this document is what the resolution will be. After the resolution is finalized, the attachment gets attached, the draft gets attached to it. And that's what goes in the record.
You're changing the policy. We're amending the policy itself. Right,
I don't think there's any particular harm in tabling this until whatever next is. If there's no next meeting, there's no next meeting.
And
They
then,
can still consider it.
then the ad hoc committee can just pass it on to the board
Right,
without any
absolutely.
CBOC action.
Yeah, because, I mean, the truth of the matter is, just as it was articulated here, this is not a CBOC. We're just three citizens here. And we can always write to the Board of Education and say, take it or leave it, so to speak.
All right, do you want to withdraw the motion then?
Yeah, I'll withdraw it.
Motion. All right, next topic.
are we gonna make a motion to table it? The
She
vote?
withdrew the motion.
Isn't that tabling it? I'm
No,
not-
that's the new one is tabling.
is
You,
that good
you're,
enough?
the first one said to send it on.
Well,
What's the difference between withdrawing and tabling it?
we withdrew it last time.
The end result is the same. We don't vote.
Well, let's take a vote. We voted down. No, that wouldn't be appropriate either.
No,
How about voting to table it?
no, that wouldn't.
We
Yeah.
didn't. All right,
We need
I
help.
mean, the board does
We
it all the
need-
time.
we need to-
Hey,
we need to
John,
just
we need him.
the motion is withdrawn, and somebody make a motion to table.
All right,
the
I'll make a motion to table this
I'll
second.
second it.
until some future date.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous,
So
unanimous consent.
Look
we
happier,
need
John.
training in Roger's rules, Robert's rules.
John, it's not the end of the world.
If you don't have a motion to act on something, then you can't vote on it. That's the same thing as it just dying.
Well, it's been officially tabled.
It's been officially tabled, so, you know, we'll find out how that. Okay, next.
All right, resolution,
I had my hand up on this item.
Oh,
Mr. Anton,
Yes, if you look at your page 3, a motion to table use to post a vote on an issue until a later date. You cannot make a motion to table without a later date, so your motion is inappropriate. And I believe what Don says, if the motion was withdrawn, there's no action required. So the action you took, if you look on page 3, is not consistent with your Robert's rules, and what you did not consider is appropriate. So I suggest you go back and do what you did in the first instance, is withdraw the motion to approve.
Can we do that?
certainly can do that. You're gonna do a reconsideration.
To reconsider.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, I make a motion to reconsider.
So do you all agree to, or you need a second to?
I
motion?
second the motion.
Okay. And so then you guys need to vote on whether you're reconsidering.
Okay,
Aye.
I,
okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now it's back open.
Now
somebody-
we say, what? We're gonna,
You you can make a motion to table it till your next meeting, which would be a specific date. Right? Your next
Okay.
meeting is already set on the calendar, so that would be a date.
October 10th, is that the next meeting date?
Yes, it is.
it's on the
Okay.
schedule, yes.
Fine. We're gonna table it until October 10th,
You need a parliamentarian.
Do we have a second?
and thank God for that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm the chair, I'm chair.
Yeah.
Rain has to say.
Oh, I second whatever she said.
Okay. October 10th is what I said.
Yes, I agree with that.
All right.
Next meeting.
Okay,
We're
and
gonna,
then another vote?
aye.
Aye.
I,
Okay,
Thank you.
unanimous.
Thank you.
is there anything else that we need to do, Anton?
No,
Appreciate the help.
Tom still has his hand up.
Yeah.
That
we
makes me
just
very
forgot.
nervous.
There.
We can do something about.
Casey's
It
gonna
may
talk
be
about
for the
something
next
else.
item.
Okay, onward.
All right,
119.
resolution 2204.
Yeah.
Sally, this is
My baby.
your baby.
Okay, I think there was a couple of things. Okay, so. Oh, my God. Can we start at now therefore be it resolved because it's exactly the same?
You're, that's fine.
It- We read the whereases for 2203. They were exactly the same as the whereases for 2204.
Except for the last whereas.
Okay, excellent. Starting with the last whereas. Whereas since sometime after January 1, 2022. Okay,
That was somebody.
Somebody
called.
talking.
okay. Membership at WCCUSD CBOC dropped below 7, at which point WCCUSD fell fully out of compliance with Proposition 39. And as it stands currently, the committee now recognized as WCCUSD CBOC has 4 members with no officer other than the chair and is therefore a non-compliant CBOC. Now, therefore, be it resolved that number 1, WCCUSD CBOC recommends that WCCUSD's Board of Education take immediate action to fulfill promises made by WCCUSD's Board of Education in all WCCUSD Prop 39 bond measures by reestablishing and maintaining a quote, independent, end quote, CBOC, capable of exercising, quote, strict citizens oversight, end quote, that is fully compliant with requirements laid out in Prop 39, 2020, school facilities, 55% local vote, bonds, taxes, accountability requirements, end quote, and all related statutes. Number 2, effective immediately after adjournment of this meeting in which this resolution is approved, all operations of WCCUSD CBOC will be suspended until such time as WCCUSD's Board of Education does the following. A, approves policies which establishes WCCUSD CBOC as, quote, independent, end quote, and capable of exercising, quote, strict citizens oversight, end quote, as promised by WCCUSD's Board of Education in all WCCUSD Prop 39 bond measures, and B, reestablish WCCUSD CBOC as fully compliant with Prop 39, 2020, school facilities, 55% local vote, bonds, taxes, accountability requirements, end quote, and all related statutes. Do we have a second?
Do we have discussion after the second?
Yeah, after the second,
All right, I'll second it.
all right. So any
Discussion?
seconds?
Yeah.
Discussion.
So may I have a point of order, please?
Sure.
Sorry, clarification, I see twice here, Prop 39, parentheses 2020. Is that supposed to be 2000? I don't believe we passed a Proposition 39 2 years ago. Or 2020. Sorry.
Excellent point. It is 2000. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing at least twice. Okay, thank you. Just want to be sure. We didn't talk about a new Prop 39.
Very good. If you would go to it's page 120 of 123. It's at the end of the,
Those were
Yeah.
your,
yeah, that's it. And if you enlarge it as best you can. When I did not take part in this resolution at all, other than Sally asked me to look it over if I have any remarks on it. And when I saw it, I wanted to make sure that I agreed that we can't go on. And so that's why I did all those red flag reports. And then I also did a report on the members. And all I did with this was for the 2021 and 2022, I went through the agendas. One of the agenda says how many members, how many needed for a forum. And then I went through the roll rosters to see who was what. And I came up with these two columns. In 21, 5 out of the 12 months, we had less than 7 members. That's 42% of the time. In 22, which consists of 9 months, 5 out of 9 months is 55% of the time. We had less than 7 members. As far as the legal number of members, in 2021, 9 out of 12 months, we had less. That's 75% of the time. And in 22, 5 out of 9, which is 55% of the time. And I said, wow, you know, what did they do in the past? So the next page shows, I went back to the other agendas in our archive. And I just wanted to see if they were low too, if they had trouble. And you see in January of 2001 was sort of an outlier. That's they only had 3 people and they were architects, and the others had more structure to them. But you see from January 2005 through December 17, they had the ones listed, they had like 18, 24, 15, 17. I figured, how did they get all those people? And so then I looked in the grand jury, which was in 2015. They listed examples of the rosters. And what had happened was they added each city council recommended one. Each trustee recommended one. And then they had others come on. So that's why they had it so low, high. They also said in that thing that it was a burden to have so many because of getting quorums and things like that. But then I looked, so that's the reason why it dropped radically. I think probably come 2018, the people were either termed out or whatever. 15 grand jury thing, and that's what we started getting the lower numbers. But when you look at ours, and you know, in the government code, it says at least 7. Now, when you look at the school districts throughout California, some of them have 2 schools. Some of them have 10 schools. We have over 50 schools in and this The code just stands for, that's the minimum. That would be the minimum if you had 2 schools. So when you look at the number of schools we have, it just makes sense to have more committee members than 7. But we're having trouble getting 7, so something's got to be done. And I don't think with only 4 members and not getting reports on time that we can continue and say we are doing oversight, vigorous oversight, as the law says. So that's why I consider going with this resolution.
Yeah.
And
So,
hopefully we can get back in line fast.
Yeah.
Sally?
Okay, so a couple of comments of my own. In the board policy, which we are not recommending at this point, but anyway, that we helped draft. I think we ended up with 11. And my own gut level feel for that, as we had discussed in our meetings about that particular number. If you set the number at 7 instead of 11 or something above that, you're going to end up with people like, miscellaneous members who cannot attend at any particular time. So then you'll have meetings with, 3
Mhm.
instead of 4, because one person can't make it and stuff like that. Have to have in the board policy a good, strong number above the minimum in order to be able to have meetings where there is at least a minimum. And Lorraine's point is very well taken, that this is a large district. I was here in, I think I got here in January or thereabouts, early 2017. So I was used to seeing 15 to 17
Yeah.
people sitting around the table, or, some number slightly below that. It was healthy discussion. There were plenty of people that volunteered and worked on the annual report.
Mhm.
And so I'm not going to comment a lot on what happened in 2018, 19, and 20 that ended up being where we are right now. It wasn't a friendly relationship, I'll say, with certain board members and the CBOC, and we're left with this. And that has to change in order for the district to get back to a healthy bond oversight committee that has a decent relationship with the Board of Education and can genuinely partner with them. This is an anemic bond oversight committee. It isn't even a bond oversight committee. What was promised to the voters is an independent bond oversight committee capable of strict citizens oversight. This is not it. And I, for one, am not going to participate any longer because it is the wrong message for the voters. They need to know, the voters need to know that this does not qualify as what they voted for, not even close. So as much as I am committed to helping the district with its bond program, I am that much more committed to an honest, authentic message to the voters and representing them in a way that I feel proud of. And right now, I don't feel proud of this position. It's not honest. The board made these promises. These statutes are theirs to abide by, not ours. they need to step up and support this process of bond oversight, as uncomfortable as it may be at times. They made the promises. They need to fulfill these promises. It's not my job to fulfill it for them in a non-compliant fashion. And I came here in person today to be able to say this, and also to say that this has nothing to do with the staff that I'm looking at, all of whom I have worked now closely with for 6 years. I have so much respect for these three individuals. I hope you're able to carry on and do the good work that you do. I really appreciate it. But I have to take this stand. These were promises made to the voters. They're important promises. And we can partner with you, but we can't partner like this.
Another thing about the number is we have so many things we have to do. We don't have a handbook.
That's right.
We don't have a policy, a board policy now on how to what the board policy is. We don't have one of our own. You need more people. I mean, with this committee, with the ad hoc committee for the board policy. Well, there are only 4 people. So you take 2 people on that, you need at least 2 people on that. What are the other people? You know, if you have 4 people, are they gonna be on 12 committees? This is volunteers here. This is not my life's work, you know? As interesting as it may be, as much as I like working for you, with you, I don't wanna, spend my whole retirement doing this 24 hours a day. So we need more people. We really do. And it really makes me sad to have to do this.
Yeah.
But I think it's gotta be done. And then, maybe in a couple months when you can get your act together a little bit more.
Depends entirely on the board.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
district.
The district, I mean, not you guys. You got your act together, but the district.
Right, you have hands raised.
We do. We move them over to the other school.
Anton,
I agree with Sally and Lorraine. This resolution needs to be passed. I support it 100%. I think what Lorraine has done in researching and the red flags and the number of hours that she spent should be applauded. I think the statement that Sally made should be given to the East Bay Times and played on every radio station in the district. That was an eloquent, helpful, heartfelt statement of somebody who's dedicated years to this district and to this CBOC. Let me give you some evidence that I considered. I want to start with the forensic audit, which was done 6 years ago. 112 recommendations. 6 years later, we have 30 of the 112 recommendations that have been independently confirmed as being implemented. I would like to point out that several of those recommendations that have not been implemented include: 1, the conflict of interest policy, which went to the board several years ago and was tabled. That policy, you recall, had to do with people making campaign contributions in order to get contracts. And that was one of the recommendations from the forensic audit. The board has never dealt with that policy, and that recommendation has never been implemented. 7 of the recommendations had to do with referring fraud allocations to the district attorney. Those 7 recommendations were never dealt with by the board and never implemented. Secondly, I'd like to speak to Lorraine's chart in terms of the membership. Of the 21 months that Lorraine presented in her chart, only 7 out of those 21 months, or 1/3, did the district meet the requirements for 7 members and the requirements for 5 legally required members. 7 months out of 21, 1/3 of that almost 2-year period, the CBOC was not in compliance. I want to speak to financial reports. Not getting financial reports for 4 months is unacceptable. When you tell me that you've been trying to fill the fiscal coordinator's position since January for a multi-billion-dollar bond program is outrageous. When you tell me you cannot give me a check register, a listing of checks issued, which is done every week and has to be produced in order for you to pay checks, is unacceptable. Education Code 15284 provides that a citizen residing in the school district who pays real property tax can file a school bond waste prevention action, retaining and preventing any expenditure of bond funds. Under that action, which get priority in the courts, all construction would cease immediately. If the governing board of a school district has willfully failed to appoint a citizens bond oversight committee in violation of the requirements of 15278, that is one of the specific causes of action outlined in the school bond waste prevention action. If an order is obtained as a result of that action, a court may award attorney fees. My 2 recommendations are as follows. 1, that the CBOC tonight approve resolution number 2204, reestablish an independent West Contra Costa Unified School District, CBOC. Number 2, that a citizen who is willing to file a school bond waste prevention action on this matter contact me for legal support. I am going to talk to the press and tell them that I will support any citizen who wants to bring a legal action against the district under the School Bond Waste Prevention Act. That's the end of my statement.
Thank you.
And we have that in writing, so you might want to post it with the whatever on that website. That is comments.
That's comment is part of the minutes. Don?
Thank you very much. And I have to agree with Anton about Sally's comments. I appreciated them quite a bit. Before I go to bed tonight, I will be pulling the audio file out and have a transcript made by the service I use and share that both with the full board and senior staff, as well as letting social media know about it as well. They need to hear what she had to say. That was very good. With those numbers that Lorraine was talking about earlier, this is one of those times where people like Anton and I get to say, well, we're the old guys. We're the guys that have the institutional history, you know. And I have to disagree with that 2015 grand jury report that says that it was unwieldy having that number of people because we weren't able to have quorum, because that was not the truth at all. We always had a quorum with those large groups of people. We always had a quorum. Wasn't until after 2015, closer to 16 and 17, where you had disharmony on the CBOC, where you had people, even the CBOC chair, telling me to shut up because they didn't want to hear what I had to say as a CBOC members. Yeah, you had people walking away saying, screw it, I just don't need this, be a part of this anymore. You couple that with the public and even member of the CBOC's distrust of the school district, especially some of the staff people that we were dealing with, not the people that we're dealing with right now. Not these people at all. These are great people. But some of the people we had back then, you could not trust them. As every time they opened their mouth, you had to assume that it was a lie. And that people just got tired of it. But also a big reason why we had a drop off, we stopped building. 2018, what did we have that we were working on? 1 school, 2 schools? That was really just about it. The public was, the CBOC, the bond program was no longer on the minds of the people because we weren't doing anything. That was a big reason for it. But there's also was a concerted effort at the district level and at the board level to undercut the legs of the CBOC. As I said, when you had members of the board just telling us that, you know, we worked for them. Now, that didn't sit well with it. Sally, you remember that. We were seeing, you know, that the trustee got there. I got the transcripts of that speech if anybody wants to hear it. But yeah, that's one of the reasons people walked away. They said, screw it. We just don't care anymore. Thank you very much.
Okay, any further comments? Thank you, Don. With that, we'll go to a vote. Sally?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion passes unanimously with 1 absence. Okay. I will, the corrections, I think that Don noted, Sally, were on the whereas, under the whereas, we had 2020,
Mhm.
should be 2000, and I'll correct those, and then I'll sign this and send a copy to the board members and Mr. Hurst tomorrow. And with that, the next item on the agenda, we have a scheduled meeting for the 10th, but based on tonight's resolution, we won't be having that meeting.
Unless magically the board does
All right,
what we expect.
and I'll need to work with Melissa and Sylvia to get at least the minutes captured for this.
Yeah.
So we get that on the record as soon as possible. So with that, I'll adjourn until we hear from the district. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, maybe you could hire a consultant to get out there and get